Welcome back. Results are in for the new annual Pentagon audit, and this year's audit looks a lot like last year's. But the Office of Inspector General at DoD says it's tracking improvements. Carmen Malone is Deputy Assistant Inspector General for Audit, Financial Management Reporting at the Defense Department Office of Inspector General. Carmen, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program. What's the big picture in the work that you did here, understanding that is tremendously complicated and tremendously vast?
Yes, good morning, Francis, and thanks for having me. Really, the big takeaway from this year's or the fiscal year 20 audit was that there was progress, but still additional progress needs to be made. I want to kind of focus on that progress first, and that is the big thing that I think people kind of overlook is that those that had clean opinions or unqualified opinions in previous years, they maintained those opinions in fiscal year 20. That's not always an easy task, and I think people need to give credit where credit is due. Another huge improvement that we saw was that the Defense Information Systems Agency, DISA, the DISA Working Capital Fund, actually moved its fiscal year 19 disclaimer of opinion to a fiscal year 20 unqualified or clean opinion. And then finally, we actually saw an elimination or reduction of material weaknesses across the department and some of its components. So I'll get a little bit more into that as we continue talking. But I think it's important to note that while we did see progress, there is significant progress that still needs to be made in order for the department to get to that clean opinion it is seeking. And so one of the ways that we here at the OIG like to think of it is that it's important for the DoD and its components to continue developing those strong, sustainable business processes and internal controls that will ultimately lead to that clean audit opinion.
And the word that you use there, I think that's the most important based on the experts that I've talked to on this program over the years, is sustainability. The fact that there wasn't much backsliding or any that I saw in the report may be the most important thing. Is that a fair thought on my part?
I think that's a very fair thought. And, you know, as I mentioned to you last year, this is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. And while we saw that progress, there was a lot that didn't change, but it didn't necessarily backslide, which is why you're going to hear my message doesn't change much from last year.
What are the actions that these various organizations undertook, Carmen, to drive the progress that you talked about some moments ago? Are there common themes among what these disparate organizations have done throughout the department?
You know, I think one of the common themes is even through its changes in leadership, we still see that strong tone at the top and a support for these financial statement audits. And I think that's important because if you don't have that support from the top, it's not going to flow down through the organization. And so you're not going to see those changes in sustainability and controls. People are going to look for the quick fixes, and that's not going to work to maintain those opinions. We also saw some significant improvements in fund balance of Treasury across multiple components. And that was a huge success for them this year, and it actually allowed the DoD to move its goal date for eliminating that material weakness or downgrading that material weakness to fiscal year 2022.
That's a pretty significant reduction in that timeline from the way this was when this process started several years ago. I want to talk about one of the areas where you report that work still needs to be done. You write the DoD had wide-ranging weaknesses in financial management systems that prevented it from collecting and reporting accurate, reliable, timely financial and performance information. That's an ongoing problem, and it's not just in the Defense Department. Is that an area where you're seeing a little bit of progress, or is that an area where not much is happening yet and it's something that you would like to see the department emphasize?
It's actually an area where we are seeing some progress. And so when we started this a couple years ago, we were more worried about the design of the controls within the system and whether they were designed properly. And so we're starting to see the auditors, the IPAs or independent public accountants, we're seeing them move to testing the effectiveness of those controls. So while we still have a lot of notices of findings and recommendations, what we call NFRs, they're different types of NFRs. These are about making sure that the controls aren't just designed appropriately, but they're also operating. And so we continue to see access control issues and some security management issues, but those are actually getting better and we're seeing them on less systems. We also saw the department start to look at systems that weren't necessarily tested in fiscal year 19 or fiscal year 20 and how the findings could be applied to other systems.
I'll ask you a question that I asked you last time we talked, and that is when we get together a year from now and have this conversation again, are there certain marks in these areas of progress that you'll be watching that you expect the department to hit, or will you just be looking for some measure of progress in each of these areas?
You know, I think we're going to be looking at inventory because in fiscal year 20, due to the coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemic, we weren't able to get out there as much as we wanted to in inventory, nor was the department. And so they weren't able to make that progress. And we are starting to see limited travel to help with that particular material weakness. We are expecting to see additional improvements in fund balance with Treasury this year, as well as financial reporting. And so I think it's going to be important that as we get closer to summer and fall, and we start seeing which components have really started making progress, that we'll be able to get out there and make sure that we're able to test what needs to be tested and make sure that those controls over financial reporting are in place for a timely issuance of the financial statements. I know that the department is currently working on its fiscal year 2021 priorities, and so it will also be interesting to see what they come out with, their priority list, and we'll focus a little bit on those priorities as well.
Carmen Malone, thanks very much for joining me. It's great to have you back.
Thank you.